So I'm going to just give a little tiny video before the lesson starts on my palette and my mixing palette and how I do the different, use your brush in different ways, just as a review. Most of you know how to do this, but it will be a quick review. So first of all, this is my palette that I keep clean. I've got my 2 yellows, my 2 reds, my 2 blues. And what I do is I take colors out of this and then I put them on a smaller clean plate where I lift colors and I put them on here, and then I work out of here. I don't work out of the other palette. So this way I can mix a few colors or do what I like with the paint. So this is my mixing palette. And here I've taken some paint and created a wash, because we're going to be doing 3 different things. We're going to be doing a wash and all one value, and then a wash that has a variation in value going from dark to light, and then we're going to do dry brushing, and each one of those you use your brush differently. So first I'm going to do a wash. Now what's different with a wash than the other ones we do is you don't want the value to change. You want the entire pass of the brush to be one. So first I wash my brush, and then I take some of the water off, usually rolling it a little bit to a point, and then I put my entire brush, I load my brush in the wash, take some of it off so it's not totally dripping wet, and then I would do a pass of the wash, and the water and the paint are the same value, and the wash stays the same for the entire pass until we run out of paint. Okay? And you can just pick that up. Okay. So maybe I'll make it a little darker so it's easier to see on camera. Put a lot of water in that wash. Okay, so I've picked up the entire brush is saturated in paint. And now I'm going to go back here. And you can see where I go over one wash with the other. Now you get that double. It's drying pretty fast today. Okay. All right. So that's a single value wash. You would use that when you're doing a large, say you're doing a large pass of any single color and you don't want the value to change throughout the pass, then you would do it with the wash. So that's a wash. Now I'm going to clean my brush again, and we're going to do a wash that varies in value. So it starts with the darkest value. Is my paper towel not really behaving? You start with the darkest value and you move towards the lighter value. So I've got some colors I've put out here already. So I'm going to do it with the blue because it's probably a little easier to see. And now I've got my brush clean. My brush is clean. I've rolled it to a point. And then I'm going to just pick up color. You can see how I get it to the point where it's not powdery, not dry anymore. And then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to go back and forth. And the further I get away from the original pass, the lighter it will get. Okay, so now I talk about this later in the video, how your brush is like a pump. So if you put water throughout the brush and then you add paint just to the end, when you touch it to the paper, the water starts pumping down the brush and it forces the pigment off the end until there's no pigment left, and then water starts to infiltrate where the pigment was, and you get this lovely variation. So you need practice to make sure your brush isn't too wet or too dry to do this. So let's do another one. So wash my brush, pull some of the water off, put it into a point. Let's do red. Just liquefying just enough of the red. Okay, and now let's do a variation of that. So it looks like a lovely pink. And then pretty soon you see how it starts to get softer and softer. And the value gets lighter and lighter until it almost vanishes. All right? So that's how you get a wash going from a stronger to a lighter value, by just putting pigment on the very end of the brush. Okay? Wash your brush again. Let's do it one more time with another color. We'll do it with some yellow, just on the end of the brush. Okay, here we go. Let's do it over some blue so you can see some color changes. A little glazing. And then the light gets lighter and lighter. There you go. Okay? So these are done with a wash where you fill your brush with the color. These are done with washes that you only put the brush on the tip. Okay, the paint on the tip of the brush. Now you're going to use this one a lot in botanical art because you always want to go lighter as you move towards the highlight. So this is probably the one I use the most as I'm moving from the darker areas or the more saturated pigmented areas into the lighter highlight areas. So this is a really good one to practice. I think I have some other examples under here. Yeah, so here's some examples of ones I've done already. A whole bunch of different ones. Okay, and here's some little tiny ones. All right. And then you can see on the lesson we're going to be doing, this is the underwashes, and I have built up these colors slowly. This is about 4 or 5 passes of glazes where you put the first one down, let it totally dry, second one down, let it dry, third one down, and you'll see all this in the lesson that's coming up. Here I've done some glazing washes where I've started with underlying colors and let them dry. First, this one was first yellow, first red, first blue. Let those squares dry, and then I applied a second layer of color, and then a third and a fourth. So you can see these lovely changes that begin to happen. All right. So now I'm going to do how we do the hatches. So the hatches are the next thing you're going to be doing in this lesson. So you rinse your brush out. You get it very dry. I mean, not very dry, but don't let it be really wet. Pick up a little bit of paint. Okay. And then you start with just short little strokes. I'm doing these bigger than I do on the painting. And you see how they now start to get softer as you move away. So this is a really nice technique. Let's do again. Let's do with blue. Just picking up on the end. Difference here is I've got a lot less water on my brush. It's just damp enough to pick up the color. And I just start hatching, hatching, hatching. And I'm not doing these necessarily right up against each other. You can do them right up against each other. They dry very quickly. Let's say if we're lucky, we can just go right back in with some blue hatches on top of this red hatch. And you'll get a nice lavender starting to happen. And then it gets softer as you move away. Okay. Oh, I think I've got some orange mixed up here. I'll add a little more paint to it. Okay. They start out dark and they get lighter. Okay. Let's do it. It's a little stronger. Let's pick up a little more pigment. That's too much. Way too much. Get some pigment over here. Just pick up a tiny bit. Still a little too wet, my brush. Okay. Let's do some hatching here. Hatch, 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 hatch. Okay. So, the difference between the hatching is drier, is more of a drier brush, and you can see just by overlaying different colors how these start to change. I just put a little bit of the orange over those blues. I'm going to put a little bit of red over this yellow. And you build up some really lovely colors really nicely. And they have a different look than the smooth glazes. You're going to see that in the next video, in the lesson that's following up. And you don't have, and also you're seeing that I'm putting the second hatch down in a different direction than the first hatch. So you don't have, so you get a little bit of, the coverage is not always the same lines in the same directions over the same color. And then eventually they look quite smooth. So this is the effect of having many, many hatches, little tiny hatches over each other. And you get all these beautiful different tones and things. So that's how we're going to begin this lesson now, and I hope you all enjoy it. It's a little different than something we've done before, and so there you go. So there's a little different little hatches. I don't know where the camera is. There's a camera, and you'll see in real time when I'm doing this next video. Now the next video, the following video, this lesson is lengthy and chatty and slow. It's done in real time. So take your time watching it. Watch it if watch it like, I don't know, 15 minutes at a time. Like this little lesson right here is probably about 10 minutes. And then the wash part of the lesson is probably about 15-20 minutes. And then the hatching part is probably most of the time, maybe close to 45 minutes. So you can divide it up, you can stop it wherever you want, and just enjoy yourself. I hope you like the techniques, and that's it. All right. Okay, everybody. That's it for now. Okay, bye. All right. Now this is much more dry. It's still damp. I don't want it completely dry. And I'm going to put a glaze. Oh, it's just a little, also cadmium. I've added a tiny bit of cadmium red to the cadmium yellow. So just the tiniest bit of undercolor. And then we'll build all the other colors on top of these. It's very just a whisper. You can see more just the bend of the paper than you can the color. It's really humid out, so the papers are staying wet for a long time. Okay. Now I'm going to just see what I'm talking about. Lifting a really light wash. I'm talking really light. You see how that's barely any pigment in it? That's how light I'm going with the glazes. Anything darker than that could cause you problems. So I go back into the darkest area each time, and then move up towards the area where the highlights are. Slowly moving in on the color. Let this dry a minute. Back. You could put on another layer of glaze. So the thing with glazes is you don't want to just keep working them into wet pigment, because then they just mix and you don't get any of that translucence of colors reflecting up through other colors. Where when you glaze, you get these lovely colors that are transparent, and it's the way the colors exchange light between each other that gives it this lovely glow. And if you just go in and you just keep mixing wet paint into wet paint, then you might as well just mix paint and paint it, and then you don't get that translucence. So this time you can see I'm breaking up the pigment a little bit so it's a little more organic, because the plum has some lovely sort of patches in the skin that are just really pretty. And instead of it being like completely one color, one pass, and one very, very smooth glaze, I like to also bring glazes in that have a little more interest in them, and then as the other glazes go on top, they all blend together and they have these different areas of light and shadow that show through them, and they look quite lovely. So that's what I'm doing now. Be the more shadowy side of the plum, and letting the pigment get a little darker. I need to put some darker shadow pigment in there soon. So you can see that little mottled effect. Do I need to make this a little bigger? Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. There we go. So you can see it a little better. I'm filming this with my iPad. So these are more traditional ways of glazing because the pigments are very thin and laid on top of each other and built up slowly. The next half of the exercise, I will start using little hatches and darker pigment, more full strength pigments, but in tiny hatches, so there's still a lot of translucence because they're not solid. You'll see when I start giving an example. So I'm going to let this dry a little bit, and then I'm going to put in the next layer in a little bit of the shadow color. So I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to test my color. I'm going to put in a very, very, very soft purple that I've made from the cadmium red and cadmium blue. And this will also become will be an undercolor. It went off out of the bounds a little bit there. Okay. So I'm putting this into my shadowy areas. Now you want to be careful just to always be sure to only put color on the tip of your brush. Do not put it all over your brush, all through your brush, because you want to be able to get that softening as you move the brush. So when you first put it down, as you see here, it's fairly dark. And then as the water pushes the pigment out, it becomes lighter and less strong. And then you can just blend it out into the other colors. So that's a nice shadow to begin with. And it looks darker now than it will once it's dry. But now see, I have to let that dry. The glazing, you have to take your time. So letting it dry. Back in a minute. I think it's dry enough now. I'm going to go in for another layer of color. You see, I'm always turning it upside down because I like to work from the darkest area up into the lighter areas. So my brush starts with most pigment on it in the darkest area, and then as I move to the lighter area, it has less and less pigment on it, so I get that really nice blend as I'm moving up towards the highlight. So putting on more of an orange. And you see as I go over that mottled application, you see these lovely little sort of variations in the pigment as I'm moving up through the body of the plum. Okay. So, okay. I'm going to do one or two more glazes, and then I'm going to move to the hatching. So what I'd also started on this page, got a little preview of the hatching there, I've just started layering some glazes. So this one I started with a yellow glaze, and then I added a blue glaze, and then a red glaze, and then a blue glaze. And you can see how each one of these has a different leaning. The yellow one with a yellow underglaze has a much more yellow leaning. This one I started with a red underglaze, just a soft pink, and then I overlaid a yellow after that was dry, and then I overlaid a blue after that was dry. And so you can see this clearly has a much pinker attitude. This one I first did a blue glaze, and then I did a yellow glaze. You can sort of see the greenish areas where the yellow went over the blue, and then I did a red glaze over that. So now when I'm saying I did a blue, a yellow, and a red glaze, very light values, like anywhere from value 2 to value 1. If you make your values too dark, you'll lose the translucency and you'll lose the nice way that the glazes react with each other. So I'm going to build this one up a little more. So on this yellow one, the yellow glaze here, I'm going to put in another little soft pass of the cadmium red. See how nice that gets. Now I'll soften those edges a bit. Okay, so now on this one that was initially a pink glaze, I think I'll put blue down, and this is sort of up to you, sort of what you want to see will happen. So I'm going to take just a whisper of blue, tiny bit of blue, put it over this red. That's going to enrich it and bring it to another more interesting point. If I went a little stronger, that would be a bigger jump. but you don't want to go, you could go back and say, okay, I'd like that even to be blue, or next glaze, you can do blue. This one was blue initially, then yellow, then red. I think I'm gonna go yellow. Let's see, let's push that, make it a little greener. Okay, here we go. Push some yellow over that. And then let that dry. Now these dry pretty fast, because they're very thin, but they still need to dry a bit. Okay. So I'm going to see if this other one is ready to go. Still a little damp. I think it's okay to put another, I'm going to do another glaze with cadmium red and a little bit of cadmium yellow. Maybe a little more red this time. And build up this glaze again some more. Okay. Oh, it's looking so pretty. The really highlighted area until I go into the next level with the hatching. So I'm just getting a nice body of color in there. Alright, I think that's good for now. Let it dry and see if we're ready to go to the next level. Okay, last pass. I'm going to put one more pass of cadmium red over, and then when this dries, we can move into hatching. Hatching is fun, interesting, get some beautiful effects with it. It's basically dry brushing. It is dry brushing, but in little hatch marks. Put a little more red in here. Keep it all down there at the bottom. That's a good place to stop with the underglazes. Okay, so schmutz right there. Okay, this will dry lighter too, and then we'll move on to the hatching. And I hope this helps, because the main thing with glazing is patience. Using nice clean colors and letting, instead of mixing red and yellow to make sort of a orangey color, you put yellow down and then you put red down, and the effect is entirely different. It has much more glow and much more light, and so the more you glaze, the more sort of translucence and beauty of each color sort of comes up through the color on top of it. And it's a really lovely effect. And so I hope you like this lesson. I hope it'll help you improve your paintings. Okay, I'll be back in a bit. Alright, so I'm back. I've done a little more work, and then I'm going to continue this work. This I now have gone from the more wet glazes underneath to the drier dry brush on top. So this is still just where the regular glazes were. Okay, you can see the modeling on the different colors coming through And I like to feel like this captures the translucence of the skin of something like a plum. So then I realized after, if you look really closely, my edges, after so much wet work, are a little rough. And this happens to a lot of you, I know. You're going, oh geez, but you've done all this work and my edge looks a little not as clean as I would like it. So I'm showing you how I go in and clean up an edge. If I have, through adding multiple layers of paint, maybe had slight bleed overs on edges so they're not really smooth. So here you can see this is much smoother. And what I've done is I've taken the color, a darker color, and just sort of done a single line stroke around the edge and then worked my way in from that. All of this doing pretty much a damp to dry brush, not as wet as my brushes were before. So I'll give you an example. So first I'm going to start with a little tiny brush. This is a Princeton 0 round, all right? This is one of their, I think this is kind of a new brush. It's called Neptune. I'm not quite sure how I feel about them. They're all right. I don't know if they're really any big step up from the usual Princetons I use. So let's give it a go. Okay. So all right. So I'm gonna start with a little bit of the red and the orange mixed in, so not red and yellow. This is if I hadn't said so before, this entire plum is being done mostly in cadmium red, cadmium yellow, and ultramarine blue. So, all right. So I get a little bit of paint on my brush, on my small brush, and you can see the little line it makes. It's early morning, so it's kind of dark in the studio, and then I just go outside. I had kind of a rough patch right there that I want to clean up. So I just go outside of it, and then I do take some color off my brush, and then do some little sort of hatch dry marks, and come in. And this way I can build up color and get some clarity on the edges, and take it from there. So I'm just going to start moving in with tiny little dry brush marks. My dry brush is almost too dry. And this way you can sort of choose which little patches you want to sort of leave evident, which ones you want to start to blend into the rest of the plum. You can decide if you're going to orange, if you want to start getting redder. And you can see how quickly with the dry brush on top of this other base glazes, how quickly that builds up. It builds up pretty fast. You can get some nice color in there pretty quickly. So this is just tiny little hatches. And if you want to shadow it a bit more, you can go in and pick up, what I did was I mixed up a little bit of, you can see, I've mixed up, this is my yellow and red, yellow and red together. Okay, can you see that? This is my, this is mostly yellow, this is mostly red, this is my cad red, and this I've mixed up a little bit of a purple using ultramarine blue and cad red, and this I'm mixing in to these areas where I want to stay a little shadowy, where I don't want to lose the form. So and I'm also using that up around the little stem that I put in. So I did a little work since the last video. I added some of this dry brush work, and I put in the color of the stem. I didn't do the detail up here, the little end of the stem, which I'll do on camera. So, oh, it's early morning and my sinuses are really going. I'm just doing a little bit before I go out and teach nature journaling. So I'm going to take a little bit of that purple I was talking about, and I'll start to put it in just soft, soft, soft. And again, I'm not building it up fast because I don't want to get this too crazy too fast. But by doing these little tiny hatches, maybe I should show you how I mix the water, how I pick up the water too. Okay, by doing these little tiny hatches. See, I just pick it up on the end of my brush. So then when I go in and I add the color, the hatches will start to get lighter with each step because there's water up here and only color down here. So when this color starts to run out, this is like a little pump, so the water is pushing down the brush, pushing the pigment off the point, all right? So eventually the pigment will be all pushed off and there will be just water. So you get, just like when you get a wash that gets lighter and lighter at the end of the wash when you're applying it, you can do the same with hatching. So let's see if I can do an example of that. So say I pick up a little bit of this purple just on the end of my brush, all right? And then I'm going to do a little hatch over here. Where can you see it? Right here. Okay, I'm going to do a little hatch. So I do little hatches, hatch, 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 hatch. Just tiny little marks. And then as I get down here, you see how light it's getting already? Because I've already run out of paint. All right? Let's see that again. So I'll do it with the cadmium this time. A little bit of cadmium. Okay. So start with the hatch. So it's just light pink, and then I just move down. And you see how quickly it changes? So that's like full strength hatch. And then now as we go down here, it's pretty much just water, and you get this nice little tiny variation in the color. So if I would, when you're dry brushing, you only put color on the point. You don't ever fill your brush with pigment. The only time you fill your brush with pigment is when you're doing a gigantic wash that's all one color. Other than that, you just put paint on the end of your brush. Alright, so I'm going to put a little more purple in. Make sure my brush isn't too wet. It's a little too wet. Pick up a little paint. Okay. And you see how right away when I touched it, it's a little darker. It's already getting lighter. Alright, that's nice. I like that. Okay. So now I'm just going to start to build up some of the general color. So I'm going to go back in. Let's put a little more of the red in there. So that's cadmium red. And this is a mixture of cadmium and red and cadmium yellow. So I can add some more brilliance, start bringing the color up and making it stronger. This is not too much unlike the class we did with egg tempera, just building up the colors with small marks, dry brushing, except that class used egg tempera instead of watercolor. Okay, so just keep picking up a little bit of the orange. Sorry about the sniffles. I always have my allergies. It seems to be worse in the morning. I think because a lot of pollen is released overnight. That's why my cars are always yellow in the morning. Cars. We have cars, but not both of us. Okay, now I'm just rambling. So this is another real-time video, so it's probably making you guys a little crazy, but these are much less labor-intensive. I just paint. Okay, so now I'm just going to work a while without talking. Whoops, here's a line. See how I'm going in? Just one smooth stroke to create a better edge. You can see here, I don't know if you can see it, I did the same thing. I had a little bit of a bump there. And you can sort of go, don't work the same area over and over while it's still damp, or you'll start to lift paint. To move around. And with dry brush it dries really quickly, so you don't have to worry. If your hatches ever get too strong, you can just take pigment off your brush and just do damp brush, dry brush with just water, and that will soften them. You know, sometimes hatches can get too stripy looking, and you really don't want the hatches to grab attention. You want them to just transform the painting with translucence and you guys are all going, oh my god, this is taking so long. Here we go, Laura, back down the rabbit hole. Don't worry, it's worth it. I'm super excited about everybody's response to the online class. I was just so unhappy with just doing these. I mean, I like doing them, but I think they're useful to you to be able to watch me really paint. But the problem is it's like painting in a little bubble, and I miss the contact with you guys in class. I miss being able to answer questions on the spot. I miss being able to, look over your shoulder, see what you're doing, and step in if I think things are, going awry, or step in and tell you how great you're doing. So I think the online class is going to be not as good, but better than just working on videos by yourself in a room and posting 1 or 2 pictures on Facebook for me to see. It's just, you lose the contact with each other too. You know, all of your friends that are in class that we've all been friends for so long, and it's such a nice relief to meet when we meet, and we chat and we talk about how things are going in our life. And I see there that got a little strong, so I just take the water off my brush and I go in and I spread it out a bit. Okay, good. Boy, when this all began, who of us thought it would last this long? It's so hard to understand the massive problem of this silly virus. I'm thankful we're staying well. Everybody I know has stayed well. So that's a blessing. So, the Cape. Yeah, we still can't decide. Our landlord at the Cape is being really cautious. He's only renting 6 days a week instead of 7 days a week, so there'll be no back-to-back rentals. There'll be a cleaning team coming in between each rental, and to give the whole place a good wipe down, clean it up for the next people. And he's removing all common things in the house, like plates, glasses, dishes, silverware, flatware, whatever. All of that is being taken out. Pillows, blankets. So basically the shelves and the cupboards will be empty. And you bring your own linens. You bring your own eating utensils. And so there'll be none of that will be shared, which I think is really an excellent idea. I think if we go, we'll just eat on paper plates and get a lot of takeout. I don't know if we'll be able to go to our favorite restaurants. I think we'll probably just get takeout from all of them. I'm sure they're all trying to survive by doing pickup for people that don't feel comfortable going into restaurants. I don't even think you're allowed to go into restaurants yet on the Cape. I think they're still at outdoor eating only. But Andrew really needs a break. He's been working so hard throughout this whole pandemic, and he's tired. I think we're all tired. I think it's not really physical tired. I think the word is malaise. Just, when will this end? I don't know. All right. So I've done a lot of hatching here, and you can see it's a nice effect. And you can see how quickly the color built up. So I gotta take a break because I gotta get ready to go teach class at Muscoot. I think we're gonna have a pretty morning. It might be cloudy, but it's not gonna be too hot. So I'll be back later. Okay? Bye-bye. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna keep doing the dry brushing and bring this up to more of a conclusion. And I'm gonna stop talking so I can run this in a little faster time, so you guys don't have to watch me all day and all night. So I'm just gonna start laying in little hatches of color, a little brightness. And now I'm gonna be quiet and just work. You can see as I'm getting up into the highlight areas, I'm trying to stay with the brighter colors to sort of give that glow of that would surround the highlight. And this plum doesn't have a bright white spotted highlight. It has just a soft glow. So this is my highlight area right in here. And I'm going back and forth between a little bit of the red, which is basically just soft pink, and a little bit of the yellow, and I'm going back and forth according to how much color I want to have show up and how much light I want to show reflecting on the skin of the plum. I'm going to pick up a little more red. You can see I've got my clean palette over here with all my primaries, and then I've got my little mixing plate here. So clean palette here, mixing plate here, and then I can bring over clean color into my mixing plate, mix my colors. Then I've got my water here and my paper towel here. So I just pick up a little tiny bit of red and go back in. a little more orange. Okay, so my secondary camera just went off. So I'm only going to have the window for the first part of this video. I'm having trouble with Apple storage. It keeps telling me I need more storage. And then when I go sign up for storage, it tells me can't do that right now, try later. I've been doing this for like the last 5 days. So, okay, see if I can pick it up again. Oh, okay, just go off. Okay. Now I'm gonna have a little bit of green here I'm gonna be using that I've mixed. Let's just see. Let's see this. I've got a palette of green. It's basically cadmiums and ultramarine. So I'm gonna be using that for the stem. I'm going to start working on the stem now. I'm going to go break a stem off and put it here. I'll be right back. Not lit very well, but it'll give us a good idea. Okay, so it's got the green on the body, and then it's got this little gnarly kind of brownish bit. So I'm going to mix a little yellow and red and blue together to make a brown. And that's going to be what I'm going to make my stem out of. A little more. I need to get a little bolder here. Sorry, it's taking me a while to mix the color. Okay, so I'm just going to put this little sort of notch on here. A tiny little brush. Just dry brushing it on. Okay, get this a little darker. And let that dry a little bit so it doesn't just look like a little blob. So I'll be back in a minute. Doesn't want to lie the way I want it to lie. now I've got, just messing around with the last little bit, and I've made the left side of the stem too dark. So I'm just going to go in, soften it up, let it dry, and then come back in and leave that light on that side of the stem. Okay? Let it dry again. That's better. And reinforce that shadow a little bit. Just a soft shadow. I don't want the shadow to be a star. And then I'm going to put a little more dark on this little rough spot on the stem. It's broken off. All right, that's better. Okay. Okay, so you get the idea. First you do the wash with glazing, where we did the glazing with the different colors. Yellows, yellow, blue, and red. This was just cadmium yellow, cadmium red, cadmium blue. You can see that undercolor of blue that I put down for the shadow has remained very deep and kept that shadow area really nice. So it's all these colors on top of it are translucent because I didn't use really thick pigments, and when I was hatching I used a very light line touch and still transparent color. And then just letting the glow of the paper come through up here as we get to the highlight, and then a little bit of the stem work. The main part of the lesson I wanted you to see was first laying down glazes of color, starting to create the underlying form and color of the plum or whatever subject you're using. Then I wanted you to see how quickly you can actually start building up very intense color with hatching without it getting watery and spotty. You get a really lovely finish. So that's it. Now this video is kind of a mess because I wasn't really planning on making a video, so I didn't really set myself up that carefully. So I'm sorry about all the different types of video you're going to see in this, but the theme remains the same as you run through each video. So I hope you liked it. Really, really, really looking forward to our classes in a few weeks. I can't wait to see people, or at least talk to people in limited space and face masks, or the online class where we can all visit and share and see each other's work and spend time together. So it's been a long time. Looking forward to seeing and hearing everybody. Okay? All the best. Stay safe, stay well, stay careful.